Hello everybody and welcome back to the NPC Dungeon. Today, as promised, I'm talking all about boss fights. A while back, I had one of my amazing viewers ask about boss fights. I was doing a series then at that point in time, but now I decided that I'm going to go ahead and start talking a little bit about boss fights now. But instead of just a general overview, I'll be talking specifically about how to make boss combat difficult. This video was going to be a little bit broader, but when I started writing, I realized just how much I had to say about this specific aspect of boss fights, about how to make them difficult. So let's get started and let's learn something. Now, if you're anything like me when I first started, it can be really tough to make a boss and really make them difficult. I mean, let's be honest, it can be tough to make any monster, NPC, or player's fight legitimately difficult in general, but boss fights are especially daunting because you have all this buildup that you now have to deliver on. Your players spend the entire dungeon or the entire arc of your campaign building up to this boss fight, and now you have to deliver. No pressure at all. But luckily, there are a lot of things you can do to make the boss fight just a little bit more difficult. One thing that I do is I use their lair. I give my boss lair actions. Lair actions in boss fights are things that the environment can do to add to the danger of the combat. For example, if the boss is an evil librarian of some kind, maybe the books can come alive and start swarming the players. If the boss is a sea monster and the players are out in a boat, you might have lair actions include whirlpools or jets of water. Lair actions generally have their own turn order in initiative. That way, your boss now has the equivalent of a couple of turns as opposed to just the one compared to your players' several. Another way to balance this is by using minions. Your boss might have one really powerful golem on their side or a bunch of little kobolds. You can even combine the two and say that the lair that the boss has is full of little traps and their minions set them off to further impede the players. But you can accomplish the exact same thing that giving the boss extra actions does by splitting the players' actions up. Here's what I mean. I like to also introduce other little goals in the boss fight as well. Maybe the villain wants to turn on a certain machine or awaken a certain evil being who has long since died. Now, instead of your players just being able to focus in on pummeling the bad guy, now they also have to stop them and do something else. And try to plan ahead for this. If you have any loose ends in your plot up to this point, now would be a good time to tie them up or add further contrivances to them while simultaneously making the combat and plot more interesting. Now that was a mouthful, so here's what I mean. Let's say an NPC got kidnapped a while back. Maybe this boss now has them, has brainwashed them, and is now unleashing them upon the players. Now it's no longer about just fighting. The players now have to have the classic "this isn't you" moment and figure out how to handle the NPC while fighting the villain, trying to stop them, etc. And let's say you've done all that. You did all that stuff, but now what if the boss still ends up getting completely destroyed anyway? Well, the first thing that I look at is HP. If adding a little bit of HP to the boss will help drag the combat out just a little bit more, then go for it. Obviously, don't do this too much or else it might become obvious and your players might lose any sense of accomplishment they may have otherwise had in winning. But do keep in mind that your monsters aren't set in stone. You can still change and modify them during combat. This means you can give them more HP just like I suggested, or you can give them extra abilities and items like I'm recommending now. What I like to do is before combat even begins, while I'm planning for this, I plan ahead specifically for this. I try to make more abilities, items, spells, lair actions, minions, etc. than I think I will need for the combat, so that when something like this may eventually end up happening, I always have something to pull from just in case. And even this isn't written in stone. You can modify these on the spot if you need to as well. If you made a special crushing attack that your boss can use to grapple a creature and haven't used it yet, feel free to increase or decrease the damage dice, for example, depending on what you need. But again, you can modify items, creatures, any other special attack, lair action, spell, whatever in this way if you need to as well. And for those of you who've been with this channel for a while, this should sound familiar. This is just like when I say it's important to plan ahead in general. You never know what might happen, so think of as many alternatives as you can, so when things change later, you can have this toolbox, as I like to call it, to pull from and modify things on the spot as necessary. Changing things and doing things on the spot might seem really difficult and daunting, but this is the way to do it. But if you don't want to do any of this, you don't have to. You can also just have the villain kind of flee. This is completely realistic and has the added benefit of changing the combat into a kind of they're getting away kind of chase scene. And if all else fails, Ex-Machinas can be perfectly fine on occasion. Again, don't overuse this for the same reason I said earlier not to overuse adding HP. It can take away any sense of accomplishment your players might feel when they eventually do win the combat. But if you are able to, there are many ways of giving the villain some kind of last minute savior or some type of other help to come in and help them out. They might have minions arrive just the right time, or maybe they were just the underling all along, and when they die, there's an even bigger boss lurking in the shadows. And you can even do the same thing for the players. If you accidentally made the boss a little too powerful, maybe backup arrives for the players, maybe an even bigger monster comes along and takes care of the original boss, or the boss could just win, and when the player's hit points are reduced to 0, they don't die. Instead, they all wake up in a cell in the boss's dungeon. And in terms of making abilities for your bosses, like I said a little while ago, you can use spells like Blur and Blink, for example, to make the boss harder to hit while their minions go around do the dirty work. Or if the boss is some big scary monster, you can add some kind of ability that can grapple the players or swallow one of them whole. Spells and effects that can stun or paralyze them can accomplish pretty much the same thing as well. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. Thanks for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe. And if you have any feedback on how I'm doing or just want to say hi, you are more than welcome to comment as well. I almost always respond. Come back next Friday where I'll talk more about boss fights, more specifically how to flavor your boss fights and really make them interesting. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, let's learn something.